that decision was to allow us time to catch up on some of the work we're doing. And they are planning on wanting to have a joint meeting with us later. I believe it's in September. So usually we have 2 joint meetings. This year, they're proposing to have one, but it's also up for discussion amongst our members if we want to try to get a second one back on the calendar before September. And with that, we can go to item E, public comment on non-agendized items. Are there any members of the public?
So we had the ones from Dawn. We just printed 2 copies of them.
Okay.
I don't know what you would like to do to handle.
So those have been circulated amongst the membership and shared with staff. There's no plan to read them. Okay. Although that was his request, it's not something I'm gonna do unless somebody else wants to read them, but we can put them into the record.
Yeah, we'll need to attach them to the meeting minutes then.
Okay.
Can we just put them on the minutes and then we'll move forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that.
Sure. Number 1, the draft minutes since the September meeting.
Oh, sorry. You want to read them all?
Oh, who's the 4 questions?
Which one?
Just these 4.
Oh, for the future agenda items. Sorry. Yes.
That's later in the agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. We can go knock those.
For a call for agenda items. Yeah. So Don Gosney did submit written comments on agendized items for the most part, and then also suggested some agenda topics for the future. So we will make sure all of that is reflected in the meeting minutes.
Otherwise, there's no public comment at this time.
Okay, fantastic.
Unless, I was like, where'd my public go? You have public comment?
No.
Let's have a moment if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Leanne Pernalla. I'm a parent, a new school parent. My son just started TK at Lupine Hills, and I just wanted to learn more about how our school district is managing its bonds, its finances, because I also have another daughter who is going to be in the school district for the next 15, 18 years. And so we're pretty invested, and I did apply to be on CBOC and just wanted to learn more. So I'm here just learning more. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for being here, Leanne. And just as a note, we're in the process of trying to get interviews scheduled. Is that right still? Have you heard anything from anybody?
Just that I should come today and say hello, and that I will get an interview scheduled.
Okay, cool. All right.
Leanne, just for the record, can you spell your name?
LYANPERNALA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dulce, because I spelled that wrong. Nice spelling. Okay, so we will move on. Let's see, public comment on agendized items. No
hands on one. Nope.
So we will move on to district reports. Item G, bond financial audit and bond performance audit presentation by the auditor.
Yes, so we have 2 different auditors, one online and one in person. And so let me just scroll down to
They can go first, you are.
do you want okay, so we have
That's me, Hugo Luna.
there we are. Yes, Mr. Luna here, from Christy White, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so yes, so I'm Hugo. I'm with the audit firm Christy White. We did the financial audit, and thank you for allowing me to do this via Zoom. And I apologize I couldn't be there in person with you today. Without further ado, let me share my screen.
Oh, let me stop sharing and make sure you're good.
Okay.
Do you have permission to share, or do I need to change something? Here we go. Allow.
Okay.
Should let you know.
Okay. So
Just
thank you.
one moment, still coming up here. Okay, now we see your presentation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So yes, I'm here to present the results of the financial audit for the 2010 Measure D, 2012 Measure E, and 2020 Measure R for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2025. So our responsibility as the third-party auditor is to issue an opinion over the financial statements, and that includes obtaining reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct and in compliance. We did issue an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion possible, and that opinion is shown on page 16 of the audit report. And I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's on page 3, the second paragraph, page 3 of the audit report. And the opinion reads, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the 2010 Measure D, 2012 Measure E, and 2020 Measure R Bond Building Fund of the West Contra Costa Unified School District as of June 30th, 2025, and the respective changes in financial position thereof for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So in order to come to this conclusion of this opinion, we performed a series of procedures which included testing of cash, that's reviewing that records of the county treasury match what was recorded in the district's accounting software, accounts receivable and accounts payable, transactions that happen after the fiscal year closes. So we're talking July, August, September, and even October. We're looking at material transactions to ensure that they were accrued and that they were recorded in the correct fiscal year. And when it comes to revenue, we typically see interest revenue. That's typically the one associated with the bond. And I just want to go over the change in fund balance. So for each measure, for Measure D, had a beginning balance of 23.3 million with 1 million of revenues and 11.7 million of expenditures with an ending balance of 12.6 million. Measure E had a beginning fund balance of 29.9 million with revenues of 1.3 million and expenditures of 16.9 million with an ending balance of 14.3 million. And Measure R had a beginning balance of 68.4 million with revenues of 9.2 million, expenditures of 4.4 million, and proceeds from sale of bonds of 250 million with an ending fund balance of 323.2 million. And combined, the total ending fund balance is 350.2 million. When it comes to construction commitments, unfinished capital projects, there were 12.5 million of unfinished capital projects related to Measure D, 16.4 million capital projects related to Measure E, and 22.7 million unfinished capital projects related to Measure R. And this listing is basically just a breakdown of the remaining construction commitments and for Kennedy modernization, Lake Elementary School campus replacement, Richmond High School modernization, Shannon Elementary multipurpose building, and Stige Elementary School campus rebuild. Now there are other building funds within the Fund 21, which is the district building fund, that are projects outside of the measures. And just for the sake of reconciling the building fund, we also do list them out, a reconciliation, and not related to Measure D, E, and R were $53.2 million with 47.5 in state funding balances, 4.8 in pooled earnings, 790,000 in other revenue category, and then with the fair value adjustment, Cashin County Treasury of 34,000, that's what makes up the balance of the 53.2 million from the other building funds. And this is just a summary of the results. Again, on page 16 of the audit report, we issued an unmodified opinion with no material weaknesses identified, no significant deficiencies to report, and no non-compliance material to the financial statements were noted. There were no financial statement findings for the year ended June 30th, 2025. And part of our audit procedures require us to follow up on prior year audit findings, and there were no prior year audit findings to follow up on for the year ended June 30th, 2024. And that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I can take them now, or I'm not sure if you want to move to the next presentation. It's completely up to you.
Yeah, does anybody have any clarifying questions? Okay, seeing none, we can go to the next presentation.
Okay. Me,
All right.
don't mind the delay. The computer, when operating Zoom, is not as fast as one would like. So you have to wait for it.
Don't hold the hardware. Well,
But if you'd like to introduce yourself.
yeah, well, that pulls itself up. Feel like I need a microphone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nathan Edelman with Eid Bailey. We have a couple audits here. So these folks, they audited the financial statements. So there's in the packet, you have set of financial statements, which is what this presentation was about. You also have something called a performance audit, and that's what we did. And yes, and actually you can just skip to the first page.
Let me just
Second.
share this with our Zoom folks.
Oh, yeah. Well,
There we go. Now everybody's here.
yeah. So that goes to the first page. Performance audit is about, not so much about the accounting, the debits and credits, but what is it that was done with those dollars during the year? And I'll tell you in a second what we did to get to the conclusions, but the end result, bottom line conclusion of all of that is what's up here, which is really on allowability and salaries. Excuse me. And yeah, these late night meetings are harder for me. I prefer early mornings. There was no payroll charge for the bond funds this year, so salaries was kind of not super relevant. But the middle thing is the meat of the whole performance audit. And the end result, bottom line end result is that there's no findings, which means that expenditures during the year, and it's that July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2025, those expenditures were tested, those were audited, and the bottom line audit result is that there's no audit findings, which means that the auditor is saying, we're saying the dollars were actually used for things that are allowable as per, this California Proposition 39, which lets school districts, and since there's maybe everyone's somewhat new on the committee, at least from last year, you probably know more about some of the stuff than I do, but Proposition 39 lets school districts put these bond measures on the ballots, and it says you can only use the money for really specific things. So you can have a school district with $1 billion of bond money, but it's only can be used for capital projects. Cannot touch teacher salaries. You can't run the school district with it. Which is why normally that last bullet about salaries is much more significant. But really it's so the limitation is Proposition 39, as well as each specific, you have 3 ballots on here, but each specific ballot further has what's called a project listing, and it a little more narrows down what can be spent. But bottom line, there were no audit findings. So if we skip to the next slide, what we audited. Really 3 things. There we go. One, it's verified that the transactions are allowable. And so there's a set of accounting records And really, there's a set of accounting for each one of those bond programs, as if each one is a separate little entity of itself. And our job is to get the expenditure accounting records, select samples, and make sure that they're allowable. And we would do that by looking at, there's invoices, there's contracts, there are purchase orders that go with these things. But make sure that they're allowable, as in, what is it that is being paid for by the bond? And does that line up with the Proposition 39 allowability, as well as the specific project listing for each of the bonds? A second bullet about salaries, I'll talk about it a little bit. Even though there were no salary transactions charged to the bond program this year, but in order for salaries to be charged to the bond program, there is a Attorney General opinion from many, many years ago that says, yes, you can charge salaries, but there needs to be a direct nexus to the bond program. And so typically you can think of, there's small bond programs and quite large bond programs, but there could be project managers, there could be people that do accounting exclusively for the bond program. So there's no requirement that salaries are charged to a bond program, but if the school district decides to charge salaries, it really has to be directly related to the bond program. It's not some, person, 15 times removed. There's no teachers. Very, very specific. And then, so we look at the expenditures, are they allowable? We are also looking at internal controls. So the expectation when you go in and we do these audits is that we pick our samples and there are no exceptions. There is no non-compliance. The district is supposed to be able to operate on its own, which they did. And so part of it is not just looking at, is it allowable, yes or no? But did the transaction, go through the sequence of reviews, sequence of approvals before, the expenditure was incurred, before it was paid? And so if that's a contract, there's a number of people have to review and sign off on contracts before ultimately going to the board for approval. So looking at the internal controls of the signatures along the way, kind of the documentation path from beginning to the end of the transaction. So it's kind of two questions. One, is this allowable? And then two, are all of the signatures in place for us to reach those conclusions? Yeah, I'm going to the next slide. So kind of talked about this briefly, but really the way that the audit works, it's a sample basis. We go get the expenditure accounting records and in the sense, shuffle them up and pick samples, and you're gonna kind of bias them towards these large transactions. With construction programs, you could easily have one construction contract or a small number of contracts or a small number of invoices, I should say, that are quite large. And then you've got a large number of smaller invoices for, there's architects, there's DSA fees, a lot of stuff in addition to the actual construction. And so it's shuffled up. There's some fancy stuff that goes in there, but it's pick a sample from those accounting records and then make sure that they line up with its construction and renovation furniture, but it's those hardcore, physical facilities. And the last thing is make sure that, if to the extent that there's any salary, those are allowable in accordance with that California Attorney General opinion. The three things on here, one thing I'll point out, the state has this audit guide for school districts, and in the back of the audit guide, they have an appendix specifically for these Proposition 39 construction bond audits. And you can audit whatever you want. You can have many audits and audit lots of things. But really, the three things on here are the three things that the state says you need to have audited if you're a school district with the Proposition 39 bond. And so that's where these come from. That's kind of the scope of work that gets laid out by the state. Go to the next slide. Or one back. Yeah, just a little bit of there's kind of three groups that are involved with these things with it. I look at it. One, in the middle is the auditors. Our job is to come in and look at documents, and then we we ask questions and then we report back to, in this case, to the oversight committee, we report back to the board. The governing board, in this case, the Board of Education, to some extent, I think the CBOC as well. In fact, for this, what we're doing here, the CBOC probably has a larger role, but the CBOC's role is to ensure that, there's an audit that's required, they have to receive the audit. If there's audit findings, they need to ensure that there's follow-up. But the CBOC and the governing board's role is this oversight and ensuring that the audit is completed. But management, I guess the bottom one on here, has the hardest job of all because they are the ones that have to actually, they're running the bond program, but they're responsible for compliance, for ensuring that the transactions are used for things allowable. They're responsible for all those internal controls. They also need to support the audit. We cannot just go in and, audit away and then come back and here's the results. They need to, send confirmations. They have to provide invoices. They have to answer the questions. The folks within the bond program have to actually support the audit. And I don't know if I have any slides on this, but there are certain audit communications that are required if management is less than forthcoming, if they obstruct the audit. And none of that occurred here. Everyone that we worked with is in fact very supportive and they answer all the questions and they get us whatever we need so that we can really get in and get out as soon as we can. And the next slide, please. Just a very brief. There are, within the back of the performance report, we've added these appendices, I guess A and B. Those are not required, but those have come, I guess, prior CBOCs have said, we want some more information about what you've actually done. So those appendices lay out specific invoices, specific contracts that we looked at throughout the audit. But they boil down to measures, D, E, and R, and it's 90%, 77%, and 90% of the total that we ended up testing. If you're wondering, no, there's no requirement about any percentage, rather we have to comply with the audit standards. And just typically these percentages are higher than we would otherwise need. And the reason why is just because you usually have on the older bonds, so measure R, for example, I don't have the visual in front of me, but typically on the older bonds, you don't have very many transactions. So a small number of documents ends up being a large percentage of the total. And then on the newer measures where there's a lot of construction activity, really a small number of invoices ends up being also a large portion of the total because you typically have construction going on and construction invoices are quite large, dollar-wise at least. Oh, yeah.
So just to chime in on that one. So for Measure D, we were, that is our oldest bond. So that's the one that we're catching up on or finishing out on. Measure E was where we were doing like the bulk of our spending, and then Measure R, for this particular year, we had very little expenditures because that's when we were still in design for most of our work. So there wasn't a lot of, so what you were saying is even though Measure R was our newest, the problem was we hadn't really, not really the problem, but the reality of the situation was we hadn't spent as much in that. And so that's probably why you were hitting those small contracts.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say older and newer, but it is based on kind of the phase of the projects, planning, design versus construction versus closeout. There's different types of activity we're going through there. So yeah, maybe not oldest and newest, but next slide, please. Or is that, yeah, that is the end of it. So I can talk about performance audit and construction accounting for a while. And there's a lot more details within the report. So I will be happy. I can take any questions or I can just keep talking if that's what you want.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, so there's compilations, review, and audit. So you're expressing an opinion on this. So you're providing an opinion based and you're backing it up.
Yeah. So the performance audit is, compilations, reviews, audits typically refer to the financial statements. The performance audit is mostly just text, not so much, there's no balance sheet income statement, but it's more about did the district follow a process and comply with the requirements?
And that's just um, it's, you're not expressing any opinion, you're just putting the data out there. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
in
no-
effect,
there's no liability on your part.
yes, for what we did, there's no balance sheet, so there's no, fund balance, there's no accounts payable. But it's looking at the invoices and saying, our opinion is whether or not those invoices line up with Proposition 39.
Well, my question is, I was actually gonna ask that, so, for the last slide where you showed measure D, measure E, and measure R, where it says the 90% tested, 77% tested, 90% tested, what is the significance of those percentages?
There's no significance beyond me just trying to provide a quick visual about kind of the scope of the work and how much was tested. It could have easily been 10% instead of 90% and still comply with the requirements, but really the point is it's not the audit's not a 5-minute process where we come in and look at something and we're done in 2 days. There's quite a bit of work, and I think a lot of that gets lost kind of in the way the reports work. So all it is me just trying to provide some visual on kind of the scope.
And
I
then my
think
other
that-
question was,
I was just gonna say, Lynn, just the context for this, I think this relates to something that we asked last year that you alluded to about kind of like the sample size and how representative that was. And so I think this is in relation to that, trying to provide more context there.
okay. Then my other question was just, for the performance audit methodology, where the slide talked about the selected a representative sample of bond expenditures. How do you decide what samples to test or what samples to use?
Oh, yeah, okay. I can talk a lot about sampling, so I'll try not to go on for too long. But really, we come up with a number that we think is a significant cutoff, where everything over this cutoff is too important to miss. Anytime you sample, you could miss something, because anytime we're looking at less than 100%, we could miss something. So we come up with this threshold. So all those large items, anything that's over that threshold, we pick all of them. We don't sample those because they're big. And then the smaller stuff, we kind of put them into a hat and shuffle them up and randomly pick a bunch of smaller items. And the intention there is that it's random and every item is equally likely to be selected. And so if we have our sample and there are no exceptions from that sample, we conclude that sample represents the population and therefore we're okay with everything else. I don't want to get into too much detail, but if we find the exceptions, if we find, let's say, one exception from a sample, since the expectation is that there are 0 exceptions and you find one, the audit standards require that you go pick a whole bunch more, because it would be wrong and it would be a violation of the audit standards to just say, oh, well, we found one and therefore, it's isolated. You got to do a lot more work if that's the case. Wasn't the case here. If there were any exceptions, those would have been identified within the report, but really kind of pick the samples, and if there's no exceptions, then the sample represents the population and makes it a little easier.
Can you define exception?
Oh, yeah. An exception would be something bad. So one type of the most obvious exception would be a really extreme, but a good example. We took a sample, accounting records say it's a construction invoice, and it turns out they're funding, teacher salaries. It would be an extreme example, but the point is the invoice, the support that we look at is contradictory to the accounting records, or it could just be we're looking at something and the accounting records are correct, but maybe the audit concludes this is some kind of an ongoing expense that really doesn't belong in the bond program. That's an exception, because the expectation is that these went through a process, an internal control process that got looked at by a lot of people. How could that be missed? It's an exception, and we would have to expand the sample.
So it triggers a new sampling to see if you can catch more, but it's just to not to be confused. It's not, it is a finding. It's a finding, right? Because I think the word exception also can lead people to believe that something's wrong. We need to throw that out, get a new batch.
Well,
And that's not the case.
and,
Because that's a finding, right?
yeah, and
Wait, is it or is it not a finding?
if there's an
In that
exception,
example.
if there was an exception.
Yeah.
It would, and I don't wanna be overly broad.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if there was an exception, that would probably have to be reported as audit finding.
Yeah, no, but in what example would it not be?
Oh, an example, would it not be?
Yeah, if you
we
found
an
an
exception on
exception
audit finding?
and it wasn't a
Uh,
finding.
Most cases, any exception is an audit finding. Maybe one example would be, not so much with the construction stuff, because we're kind of looking at two things. We're looking at the construction, is that allowable? We're also looking at internal controls. So let's say we found an exception with internal controls, and maybe the nature of it was that, something required. This is just an example, not really specific here. Let's say that, an invoice required 5 signatures before it could get paid. There's a project manager and accounting and a bunch of people sign off on it. And one of the invoices that we looked at was missing one of the signatures. And that would be an exception. And we might say in that case, you gotta look at more things. And let's say we look at more things and there's no other missing signatures. And we say, well, there's still 4 other signatures and that was probably sufficient. And we expanded the sample, there were no other exceptions. That might be a situation where we would say that, okay, missing one signature on one thing was not a problem and that wouldn't be a finding. But that's a little more unlikely. Typically, if you have an exception, it's also not a finding.
It is a finding.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, because I think to me, as doing an audit of the process, if a signature is missing, that's an issue.
Yeah.
And so what kind of shakes the credibility here, and I know you guys are above board and bound by all these standards, but to know that you can make a judgment call on whether a signature missing is an issue or not, or 2 signatures are missing, seems a little.
There has to be some level of judgment. So with the performance audits, you can predefine, materiality thresholds. But I think the relevant thing would be, if there are exceptions, there has to be, and there's an expanded sample, and if there's an exception with the compliance, there is not a method of evaluating. There's no such thing as immaterial non-compliance. So if there was an expenditure that was identified, there is no process to conclude that that is not something that could not be reported as a finding.
So are you
If that
looking
matters,
more
if that-
are you looking more for a pattern than, say just one significant, like this one specific invoice didn't have it, but all of the rest of them did? And so you would consider that not typically a finding, or are you looking for, say, 5 out of 15 invoices didn't have all 5 signatures, and that would constitute a pattern in non-compliance?
Well, if you have more than one missing signature, it's really, really hard, almost impossible to say that it's not an audit finding at that point, because when you pick a sample, expectation is that there's 0 exceptions, and then you expand the sample. If you find another exception, then there's no point at that point you have to have audit findings, because it would be really strange if you have a representative sample, then you keep finding exceptions. That wouldn't work. But on the compliance side, if there is non-compliance, and when I say compliance, I'm referring to is an allowable use of funds. If there was a unallowable use of funds that was identified, even if it's $1, then that would need to be reported as non-compliant, if that matters. There's not a process to say that there wouldn't be a process to conclude otherwise, basically.
Okay. And if a second sampling was taken, would there be any scenario where we wouldn't know that? in the audit report.
Oh, the second sampling was taken and then there were no further exceptions.
Correct.
I should make sure we're talking about, that's just on the internal control side though.
Okay.
No, I don't think that would come through in the report.
So that's, I mean, it's nitpicky, but it's kind of like, this is an audit. This is an independent audit that should be pretty transparent. So that's a problem from my perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say if that is something of a concern, performance audits are a little different than like a standard financial audit. Performance audit, you just say, oh, we want to know about everything. So if there's anything, report that, and then you put that into the like scope of work, and then it gets reported. So that can easily be, I guess, solved for next year. And I don't think there was anything, but I don't have that in front of me, so I don't wanna say. If there were any audit findings though, there's no gray area there, those would have to be reported. But if you want to get kind of beyond that, not something that would not have risen to the level of an audit finding, just gotta put that into the scope of work at the beginning, which that can be done, it's not hard.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. One, is it unusual for a bond program of this size to have no findings, or is that pretty typical? I'm just curious. I'm not familiar with a lot of others, so.
Pretty typical. I mean, I see findings all the time. At the same time, there's lots of school districts similarly sized that have no audit findings. You know, you can, audit for whatever you want, and you can, add, and the more you add, the more findings that you'll have because there's just more scope of work. But just, following the audit guide that's laid out by the state, you follow the things that the state says, it's not unusual to have, no audit findings. Part of it, if they're audited every single year, there's a process that these things have to follow. They've been kind of set up and pounded on. And then also school districts, you have oversight committees, you have things have to go to the board. There's public bidding requirements for these things. And so there's always a trade-off between efficiencies and just making sure that everyone knows what's going on and everything happens in like open view. So, there's a lot of, I guess, oversight and just a lot of people that look at these things. So it would be, I think, unusual for any kind of, decently run bond program to just suddenly have some massive, if there was any confusion about using funds for, teacher salaries or for, running the school district and someone didn't know that, it would just be very unusual. So I don't know.
Okay. Second question, you said a minute ago, you had a slide that talked about the importance of management in this process.
Yeah.
And that was like really critical, right? So I assume you probably are somewhat aware of some of the staffing issues we've had in the district vis-a-vis the bond program and that now. And I don't know, maybe Ellen can help answer this in terms of plans for replacing critical members. Melissa in particular, obviously. And I'm just curious if that current and, waiting to see how it's resolved situation is going to be problematic for this next period. If that's something that the district should be concerned about, those paying attention to the district should be concerned about. And I guess maybe that's to you and then to Ellen, like, is there a plan for that? Is there should folks be concerned that a staffing shortage is potentially going to impact the ability to get you guys the information you need in a timely manner and thorough manner? And would that potentially be problematic?
I'll start, let me defer because there's nothing in the report that would talk about kind of the future staffing or even current staffing. Really, the expectation, management has to run the bond program and then answer all of our questions. And everything that we did is June 30, 2025 is the cutoff. And so people who were in place at that time may not be here now. And the place where that would more likely be seen would be next year, June 30, 2026 audit. which probably doesn't answer the question or, give you much assurance for what you care about. And where that would normally come in, it's one thing, there could be errors, that are more likely internal control errors, or there could be more internal control errors. There could be non-compliance, although with all the oversight, I'd still be a little bit surprised, but I wouldn't say no. But the more likely thing that happens is that the audits become delayed because auditors ask questions and they don't get what they need. And so I'm not saying that it didn't happen this year, but I have no idea about what would happen for the 2026 cycle. I know that there are people in place and who were still able to support the audit and to get this stuff. So I have no concerns, today from where I'm sitting, but my view is also kind of somewhat limited to just being able to support the audit.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up question on that. Is that something that you as an auditor, not on the financial side, but the performance side, would ever look at and consider, like, is this bond program adequately staffed? Is that something you would ever look at or would be important in that outlook?
There's nothing in the current scope of work that would trigger us to look at that. Because you can add on, you can expand the scope of work, but there's nothing in what the state says, and there's nothing in what we're looking at that would have any comments about staffing beyond what's required by the audit standards, which would really be if management was, caused delays either intentionally or just because of a lack of staffing could be one reason. But it would be this after the fact, and it'll all be in relation to being able to complete the audit. So
Okay.
It's probably a little more narrow than what you're looking for.
Okay, so in this vein, and I didn't originally intend to do this, but I think it's important because I think there's some important things brought up that Don has in his comments. So I'm gonna read his comments on item G into the record. And they can either be, since it's past public comment period, I guess I can own them myself, but I want the record to show that these are from former committee member Don Gostin for item G. I frequently ask this question about the performance audit and never really got a response that adequately addresses the question or the needs of the CBOC and the public. Previous auditors, CBOCers, board members, and senior district staffers all understood that one of the things the auditors would address is the actual health of the bond program. This goes far beyond just validating that it meets the minimal requirements laid out on the GAGAS Yellow Book, generally accepted government auditing standards. Should the auditors accept that all there is to a bond program is what is fed to them by the very people they are auditing? We have some very good people working in the bond program, but that was not always the case. It's because of the problems we experienced in the past, where we were routinely lied to by the facilities manager, that necessitates our auditors reach out to sources other than the people they are auditing. In particular, they used to reach out to the CBOC chair, members of the audit subcommittee, and other CBOC members that wanted to share what they knew. One of the associate superintendents convinced the Board of Education that if they streamlined the audits and stuck only to the bare bones minimum, they could save some money, and without consulting with the CBOC, voted to minimize the audits. Who is being served best by this? So the question is being put before the auditors tonight, asking why the CBOC chair, me in that case, this is Don, was never asked to share what I knew. Why was the rest of the CBOC excluded from this process? If transparency is the name of the game, this has failed. And I don't know if there's anything in there that you necessarily need to, or it would be appropriate even to address if you would like to, absolutely. But I just wanted to make sure that those thoughts, because I think they're important to this discussion. Get please.
I mean, I'll just, really the scope of work, at least following what the state lays out, it is objective and it's really on the highest level, it's invoices, are those allowable? And that's kind of a little simplification, but that's on the highest level. And so questions about, the health of the bond program, did the district, have been making good decisions about using the dollars? Should they have done project A versus project B, or expanded or decreased the scope? And all of these kind of super important questions, super important things, but they're just not something that auditors will look at and second guess a valid decision of the board. And the board has to, goes with the CBOC, at least there's that communication between the two, but auditors wouldn't second guess and kind of go beyond that objective. Our signatures there, does it line up with what's allowable? And it's kind of a yes or no question for the most part.
So would you say that that's something beyond the audit you described, where you're basically looking at a sampling, a percentage of the overall, and just making sure it aligns, that specifically there's no money spent inappropriately? Is that, and that's kind of the minimum requirement for the state, right? It doesn't really tell us at all about, is the Braun program healthy? Are there, is it being well run? Is it being efficiently run? Are there ever auditors that would look at those things? And is there a reason potentially to do so? So you had a bigger, kind of clearer, bigger picture of the bond program?
Yeah, so performance audits can be quite broad. And the state says what you need to do. And so we have to follow that. We do have other ones where we look at more things. You can call them like expanded audit scopes, where even then, I don't have anything where I'm looking at health, because health is can be interpreted a little different. But there are things where we look more at, at change orders and kind of adherence to timelines and budgets. And so there certainly are a lot more procedures that could be added in. It's just kind of a decision for the CBOC to talk with management and the board. And but yeah, there's always more that can be done. Okay, some trade-offs and I guess cost and timeliness sometimes, but yeah, there's anything that's objective, I'd say can be audited by auditors.
Hold on 1 second. Just a follow-up to that. I think that's something that we could talk about, we could agendize for the future, is a conversation about the CBOC influencing the scope of the performance audit. This topic, we always have more discussion on the performance side than the financial side during these presentations, and some of the same themes come up, especially staffing. And so I think we should agendize it, and we should also think about like what is reasonable, what are some of the constraints on the funding side. But I think we really have a lot of put a lot of value on some of the things that we think could come from the performance audit. So I do want to go to Dulce, and then we'll go to Bill. We'll keep going around.
Hopefully my questions are quick. But I wanted to ask which pool of funds is the audit, specifically the performance audit, paid for? With? Do you know, Ellen?
I will have to get back to you on that. I don't.
And is it part of is it paid through with one of the bond programs?
I know in years past, we paid with it we paid through the state, what we call the state reimbursement fund, right? Where we are reimbursed from the state, for, facility projects. I don't specifically know for this one, but I do know that that's what we typically used. But I can double check whether this one was paid out of that as well.
Okay, and I'm just gonna repeat it because I'll be taking notes, but for the record, Ellen will get back to us on the funds used to pay for the audit. And then Nathan, you mentioned that you can predefine materiality thresholds. Is that through the work scope?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you say, that's an easy one. If the CBOC says, we want to know about everything 100%, then we just, I don't know if it'll actually change anything, because I feel like we might actually be doing that, although it wasn't specifically in there. So if you want to put that through the scope of work at the beginning of the audit, then not a problem with that.
Yeah, that was my follow-up. Would it be possible, I guess this is an Ellen question, to receive a copy of the work scope from the performance audit that we're getting today?
I mean, our contracts with our contracts with anybody are public record. So if that's one of the things that the CBOC would like to request, it would go through your president, like any other requests that you want to make, and we can provide that.
Okay. President, would you be able to make that request?
Chair, yes.
Chair.
Something.
Chair President, great. That's
Yeah.
it for me.
Okay, Bill? Thank you for.
Okay, thank you. So your audit report, how does that, I'm not sure and then there's a financial statement report. Are the supplementary information and other reporting required by government understandings? Is your audit report part of those two, in anywhere in those two paragraphs for the audited financial statements where an opinion is being presented?
Oh, probably not. The financial report is something different people. So if it talks about required supplementary information, that's probably not part of the performance audit.
So how does the performance audit work into the auditor's report for the financial statements? Does it at all?
They're only related in the sense that, there's a set of accounting records that has to be audited, and that kind of becomes the official. And then we take those accounting records and then apply those performance audit procedures. The one thing I actually forgot to mention, the performance report is a draft report, and that was intentional. And the reason why was because we wanted to have this meeting here. The only thing to do is remove the watermark and undraft it, and then, it'll have the letterhead officially when it gets issued. But it is a draft report, and some of that was so that there is a method if we need to make some. We don't want to make wholesale changes, but if there are comments that come from this group, we can still make some changes.
Since there are so many comments that are always made around this particular section, is it possible for the CBOC to kind of review the audit request that you guys receive as like a cover letter to our report so that we can see exactly what was asked for, the signatures that are on it, and then proceed from there?
Well,
Like when you guys submit the transmittal to the auditors and request X, Y, and Z with all of the signatures, CBOC approval, all of those things that they're looking for, is it okay for the CBOC to just receive a copy of that as well?
So I think the scope of work is defined within your report of what you were.
yeah, the scope of work is within the report, and then we added in that's why we have those appendices in the back where it lists out literally every transaction that we looked at. And then the contracts as well. There's some contracting things that we look at as well, about public bidding that we've got those listed as well. Kind of the mechanics of it doesn't lend itself well to being like printed on a PDF. There's like electronic portals where things are uploaded, and but those appendices were kind of the best attempt to be able to provide a lot more details than just saying we audited 90%, but here's what actually makes up that 90%.
That's this, let me share my screen again.
But is the
Yeah.
question more
So maybe you
of,
can.
is your question more of what's being required?
Yeah, what's being required.
Asked of the district staff for what they need in order for you to do the report? So is it possible for us to get a copy of what you're asking of them to receive?
And vice versa, yeah, because I
And
think
vice
the thing is
versa.
just the transparency portion, right? So we see what you're doing, we see all of the transactions that you've gone over, but the actual request that came initially, that's what, on both ends.
Yeah, I'm trying to. And maybe if you want to scroll to those appendices in the back, they're
Well,
at the very back.
I thought that you had a section in here, right here, the scope of the audit. This is what his scope of work is, right?
Yeah.
Because really the scope of work is defined by, what the state requires for the scope of work.
Yeah.
So is there some place where we can go and look? I think, which would help us. Is there some place that we can go and look and say, okay, this is what the state is requiring. This is what the auditors need to collect from the district staff so that we can compare and contrast in saying this is what they received or this is what, and vice versa. And they met the requirements for what was required in order to receive according to the state requirements.
Yeah, so Yeah, so maybe what would help, a couple things. So one, if the starting point is what the state says, go audit. That's a public document. You can search online, you could type LEA audit guide, and it's this thing called like EAP, this education.
I have it pulled up right here.
Yeah, so if you find that, it's like a website, looks like it's from the nineties, but there's a tab, like a drop down, you can find current audit guide. And it doesn't change much from year to year. But somewhere in there, there's an appendix that says school construction bond audits. And make sure you don't mix it up. There's also something about these Prop 51 audits, which is like 120 pages, completely unrelated. But one of them talks about Proposition 39 performance audits. And that's literally the actual, what the state says you need to go audit. And you can go through those procedures and line those up with what you have here. And this is the listing of expenditures, so you can think of, kind of to your question about what did we ask them? You can almost think of, you get the accounting records. I'm gonna probably oversimplify this a little bit, but we get the accounting records, it's Excel sheets. Kind of, that is what we send to the district in a sense, like probably, you know, it's on an Excel sheet, so it looks a little different, but it's this, that would be the sample that we selected. And we said, give us the support for all of these. So give us the invoices. Depends a little bit about what, but for the most part, let's say the construction expenditure. So give us the invoice. And so everything that we asked for, and then everything that we received, because if we ask for something, there is no method for them to not give it to us. I should maybe make that clear. There is not a path for them to say, oh, we don't have this one here, so therefore they'll pick something else. That's just like
Not a thing.
that can't happen. I mean, I guess anything could happen, but
Well, that's fine.
if there's something in the accounting records, there needs to be support for it. If it was, maybe there was a journal entry, and so it was, you know, journaled out to some other funding source. And so therefore it's not part of the bond program. There will still be a journal entry. There will be support that kind of connects the whole documentation trail. So everything that we ask for, we need to get a response. And that is what you have here. So it's kind of maybe the answer to two parts, which is here's what we asked for, and therefore that's everything that we received. On the next page though, Appendix B, or actually I guess it goes on.
It's two pages.
One of them is when it gets beyond the expenditures and talks about contracts. Right, I think it's this one. Which is it?
Yep.
Oh yeah, this one here.
Good one.
This one is actually may not be helpful to some of the stuff you're talking about, but it is that is beyond the standard scope of work. When you look at that state audit guide, it really just says go pick those expenditure transactions and make sure that those are okay, and make sure that there's no salaries that are unallowable. It doesn't talk about contracts and procurement documents. That's something that we've done here that is more than, you know, might not be as much as you would like in some cases, but that's something that you'll not see in the audit guide because it's not required. But I feel like, you know, they're public bidding, public contracting code, and some of that is still a big part of what the bond program does. So even if the state doesn't say pay attention, it would be a problem if things weren't going through the bidding process. And so we still want to look at those. And so that's what that one is here too. But similar, those would be the contracts that we asked for, and then they have to give us all the contracts, and there's not really a method. Okay, so take one out.
Yeah, I actually had a question about this. So is there any overlap between Appendix A and Appendix B? Like if here there's Alton construction for Lake, but then in the expenditures, there's also a whole bunch of Alton construction shows up for Lake. So are the expenditures, Appendix A, like materials, supplies, and this is the contract fee, or is there?
Yeah, they're overlap, they're related. So like if I'm seeing that right, like Alton construction looks like a quite large contract,
Mhm.
one contract, and I may be oversimplifying that a little bit, but you can think of one contract and there could be 10, 20. There could be many invoices, and depending on the size of the contract, they may go over multiple years as well. So lots of expenditures, not as many contracts.
Okay, but it's not like if you add up all the Alton construction from appendix A, it would equal it.
No, that would work in theory, and if you get all the accounting records, but this is not a complete set of the accounting records, so this is not all of the contracts, and those dollars are meant to line up with kind of the time period and the scope of what we looked at, not so much a complete set of accounting for the bond program.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but when you ask for a contract, you ask for things like, how was the selection process done? What was the scoring? How was this person contracted, right? And the expenditures that you see in Appendix A is really for this individual invoice. Did we pay the invoice correctly? Did we pay the right amount? Did the right people sign it in the right order?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So while they're related and you'll see overlap between the contracts portion in Appendix B and the Appendix A, they were actually looking at two different types of criteria. And so that's.
Yeah, that makes, yeah,
Is that right?
that makes sense. I mean, the process to go through and select a contractor, somewhat related to, but still very different than the process to, you know, review and approve an invoice based on what's happened during a 30-day period on the site.
And then I just have one question about, in the financial audit, there was mention of Fund 21, like a 53 million. Was that, so did the financial audit cover Fund 21? And then did also the performance audit cover that? Or was that just like kind of an FYI?
So Fund 21 is our bond.
Okay, so then where was that 53 million? It was like separated out on,
You know what page it was
I
on?
think it was on the packet. It's on page 21, so it's page 13.
And I can speak on that. So
Yeah,
Fund 21, Fund 21 is where the bond is tracked, but it's also where non-bond projects are tracked. So what we do is we break it out with measure D, E, and R. And then we also, just for the sake of reconciling the entire fund, we show the fund balance of the other projects funds that have nothing to do with the ENR, just to reconcile the entire fund as a whole.
okay, cool. But that part wasn't audited. That's just showing it. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have questions for Nathan here?
Well, in this, were you talking about this chart?
No.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we were really off.
Can I just put something quick? And this is just for me to, I don't know, like what would happen if there were findings? Like what are the steps or what are the consequences for any of these? Like, is it like 1 out of 3? It's not as bad or like.
Oh, yeah, okay. What would happen if there were audit findings?
Yeah.
It really depends on the nature of the findings, but they would, one, in all cases, be part of the performance audit. So there would be something that says, oh, no problems except for, and here's the nature, the scope, give you some context about what the finding is. And then really, we would expect there to be some follow-up, and we would also expect that the finding doesn't repeat the following year, because the management, the district needs to then, you know, fix it. There shouldn't be audit findings.
And Tanya, from our side, we would then, you know, get more curious about that finding and maybe dig in a little bit, understand a little bit more. That would be a part of our annual report, highlight that, you know, type of thing. That's kind of our role, is to, you know, rely on these independent audits to then kind of further provide oversight, communicate that out to the community.
And Hugo, I don't know if you want to chime in if there's anything different that happens on the financial audit versus the performance audit, if there's a finding.
No, it's no, when it comes to findings, there it's the same kind of thing. Yeah, no, it's rare that I have the financial audits that I usually see, the financial audit findings, usually related to like when I talked about those transactions that happen right after the fiscal year closes, so like in July or August, sometimes what'll happen is the transaction will happen in July, for example, and it won't be recorded in the correct fiscal year, even like if it was for work done in June but paid in July. So that's a common one that happens, and basically it's corrected in corrected as an audit adjustment. But that's not part of a fraud or anything like that. It's just financial statement correction. It just gets corrected as an audit adjustment.
Okay, anything else? Final questions? Oh, I have one actually. Back to slide 4, the first bullet point, or the first
Page
box,
number
verified
by any
costs.
chance?
What's that?
Do you have a page number?
4, slide 4, page 31.
31.
So the verified costs were for voter authorized projects listed in the bond measure. So the bond language is pretty extensive. If you guys haven't read it yet, everything in the kitchen sink is in there. So what's your process of, what's your methodology of ensuring that item is checked off?
Yeah, the big thing there, I mean, these all have to be constructions. You're right. These things are almost universally very specific. They list out schools and then they've got a caption and, any and all renovation that may be necessary. And so you're limited in what Proposition 39 says. And so to the extent that there is something more restrictive, we'll look at that as well. But really is this a construction expense or is this something that is allowable for, a Proposition 39 general obligation bond? And that's to some extent it's looking at those, the contracts, but it's contracts and purchase orders. And then it's really the, specific invoice for those, like back to Appendix A, those lines, there's going to be an invoice, contract or purchase order. There's going to be documentation that tells us exactly what's being paid for. And it's, very specific usually. And then it's 99% of the time in all school districts, it's very obvious if it's allowable or unallowable. And it should be allowable because we're going through these audits every single year and there's internal controls in process. In the rare event that there's any kind of, ambiguity, we'll gotta go through a process and ask questions. But I mean, if you're looking at a construction invoice, it's gonna list out the name of the school, it's gonna list out exactly what they've done. They're very specific, but we get methodologies, get the invoice and then really make sure that they are what we think they are.
So it sounds like you rely on what's normal, what the norms are and past experience, but like, are you looking at the specific bond language every year or coming back to the specific language to make sure that everything is represented? I mean, it's very, there's a lot of stuff in it. And I'd be surprised if there was any expenditure that didn't match up with the bond language, but isn't that what that requirement is? It's not just to weed out teacher salaries, but to actually say like, technology was not called out. It is, but technology was not called out in the bond and thus,
So if I'm understanding, going the other direction, going from the ballot to the support would not be something that we would look at with the scope of work. As in, they may call out the specific ballot may list, multiple school sites oftentimes and lots of very specific things. There's no requirement in Prop 39 that the district do everything that was envisioned on the ballot. So the ballot language, the project listing becomes kind of the limit, but does not become the requirement. If that makes sense.
I mean, it makes sense. I understand. I think it's weird because I think like our job is to do the same thing. And I think maybe I'm speaking for everybody, but like the voter authorized projects and everything that I've read about our mandate is to make sure that expenditures match up with the language in the bond. And voter authorized projects is also, to me, synonymous with bond language.
Yeah, everything that is paid for by the bonds has to be allowable from through the ballot, through the project listing, but not vice versa. So everything that's in the project listing is what was envisioned by the district, what they would like to do, could be a wish list. But those are more of topics that I do see CBOC talk about, as in, you know, we've told the community X, Y, Z, we want to prioritize X, Y, Z. How do, we only have, you know, Z number of dollars. How do we use that? What is the priority for the district? But what we would do though has to be objective, and it's really just, does the invoice line up with what's allowable?
Well, that's good to know. Okay, anything else? Anything else come up?
I
People?
did get a clarification from Mr. Carter. So Mr. Carter's online. And for those that, don't know, he's our acting, I was gonna call him Chief Business Officer, but he has another title. But anyways, he's the main money man. And so, he is online with us tonight, and he did confirm that the audit was paid out of the 9790 fund, which is what I was referring to earlier, where we put our state reimbursements and, other interest earnings. So it's our kind of in between bond and non-bonds accounts. But you'll see it, in all of our financial reports. So if we have any questions about that particular account, we can go through that in our, financial reports.
Real
Yeah.
quickly, Chair, is that also the case for the financial audit?
I believe so, yes. I believe both the audits were paid out of that.
Nathan, thank you for letting us grill you.
Yeah, Nathan, thank you for coming in person. I think it makes a big difference. And
I think.
put you in the hot seat a little bit, but we really appreciate you being here in person.
Oh yeah, but much more effective. Yeah, not a problem.
Well, and we do still have, Mr. Luna online. So, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so
Okay.
otherwise.
Yeah,
Are
and
we
and
free to
thank you,
move
Mr.
on?
Carter, for clarifying that for us. So we can move on to the next item.
All right.
Excellent.
And your excuse.
Thank you so much for coming.
Probably took a little longer than you wanted, but hopefully
No,
it was
we
productive.
appreciate your time.
See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Item H, bond program progress and status report by Ellen.
Yay.
The fun
Okay,
part.
I apologize beforehand for my voice. It's better today than it was yesterday. Yesterday I was a little nervous about today, but we're hanging in there, so I'll see how long I last. But I apologize in advance for my weirdness. All right, so Lake Elementary School, we've had our grand opening celebration, which was awesome. We had a lot of people come out. It was a very nice little celebration. If you click on our little thing here, let's see if it works. Let's see if it works. Popped up a different page. The communications department did a really nice job of putting together a little snapshot of the event. We had one of our kindergarten teachers present. There's me. We did a tour. That's the construction crew. This is part of the management and our facilities folks or our finance group. Superintendent Cotton, we had some kids come up and present or do the chant. That was our design team. So it was fun. We had a good time. And that was, I've lost the presentation, but there we go. So anyways, good event. Page down, we did still have a few lingering things. The rain just would not cooperate. And so even though we grand opened, we didn't quite get to the turf yet, but after the grand opening, we did finish the turf. So the turf is now open. We officially opened it, after the February break. I was told by the construction management team, that the first day there wasn't like a kid not on the turf. So it's been a big hit.
Synthetic or actual grass?
It's synthetic. So we also have a garden area in the back. So it'll take some time for the kids to engage in the garden. But we do have a partner that runs our garden programs for Lake. So we're excited to see what they'll end up doing and growing out there. So anyways,
Who's that? Partner?
growing together.
Okay.
So that's like, do you have a question, Mike?
Oh, no, I was like, that day, that's when the freeway was closed for like 9 hours. I thought you were gonna say that that's what happened. Yeah, because of the,
I was not responsible for the freeway.
I was like, oh, I wanted to see the whole.
Yeah, so the Shannon cafeteria rebuild. We have been able to open the main cafeteria dining area. So the dining area and stage have been used. They had a spelling bee, which was fun. However, our kitchen is not quite ready yet. We are still getting reviewed from, we've had our first inspection from the health department, but we still need a second inspection. So we're not quite there on the kitchen, but they are using the dining area. So that's exciting. For the Steed Elementary School rebuild, reviewing our phases, right? So phase 0 is complete. We did the demolition a while ago. Phase 1 is under construction right now. So that's predicted to go through this or till the summer. And so right now we're, I'll show a couple slides of where that work is in a second. Phase 2 is in DSA review. This has taken a little longer than we anticipated. So we have not received the comments back yet. We watch the tracker every day in hopes that we're going to be changed. We were outsourced to a third-party reviewer, which DSA does when they have high volume. And we had a code change, which means a whole lot of people turn in their drawings right before the code change so that they can stay with the old code instead of the new code. That happened again this year to a big extent. And so DSA has sent out communications saying that there was a deluge and we're part of that wave.
When
So
did that go in, end of the year?
no, we actually went in end of October.
Oh,
So we thought we
got
were
ahead of that.
we were planning on being at the precursor of the wave. But apparently didn't quite get there soon enough. So, I mean, it happens, but we are,
Timeline of when they think it'll be.
well, the problem is every time we look, the timeline just keeps getting pushed out further. So we were supposed to have them almost a month ago, according to the original estimates. And we're still not with their initial comments. So once we get our initial comments, we still have to make the changes and then send them back for back check. So there's still a little process to go. We're watching it closely though, and we're trying to reach out to ESA respectfully for them to,
I'm curious, so
Pay attention.
that's design build, right?
yes,
So they're locked into a set amount,
they are.
the design.
Well,
build
it's
team.
progressive design build, but
Oh,
they have we have a,
So I'm just curious, what happens if it's kind of a worst case scenario and DSA doesn't, that process doesn't conclude until late 2026 or whatever, right? Later, way later than anticipated.
Yeah.
And then with the war and the price of oil and goods, everything starts to climb.
Yeah.
How does that affect a progressive design build project like this?
well, I mean, at that point, it's almost a force majeure, all right, an act of God. We can't always anticipate everything that'll happen in the world, especially when it's as unexpected as what's occurred recently. However, you know, our game plan to help mitigate is to bid out the back check set. Obviously, we take a little bit of risk when we do that, and we won't award until we have full DSA stamp out. But it's the best way that we can get out on the market as quickly as possible. So that hopefully we can hit it before anything. At the moment, like, our bidding response has been phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
We are getting a lot of people out for our walks on our summer projects, our Richmond bids came in lower than expected, for this phase one. We're not out of the woods yet, because when you do a multi-phase project, it's a little bit more complicated, right? You never know if phase two is going to have as good of an economic market as phase one did, so you have to be careful not to get too excited when phase comes in lower than anticipated. But whenever you beat your estimated budget, you're always a little bit excited. So that's the bidding climate we're seeing at the moment. I don't know when that's gonna turn. But we are happy with our current bidding climate. We're getting a lot of coverage.
And phase one is still on track to be complete by what, July, August?
Well, we're nervous.
But that's already approved and being constructed, right?
Oh, phase one. I'm sorry. I was thinking of the
Yeah,
total
sorry.
project.
Utility and
Yes,
stuff.
no, phase one's on track. We did run into some unforeseen conditions out on site. So we are dealing with those. That site has been available or occupied since 1904. So we have found remnants of previous construction.
And is that, how do you deal with that in a design build project?
Well, again, right now, we're hoping, most of it can be absorbed within the
There's
contingency.
contingency, okay.
But it will, because we were really not anticipating it. I mean, not to the scale. We're still evaluating what really that cost is looking like. We haven't gotten all the information just yet.
Have you found old structures or like foundations and things like that? Or
We found a basement. We've also found some tanks. So we're gonna deal
you
with
say paint?
tanks.
Tanks, yeah.
They're probably,
I mean, most of the old sites in Richmond have that stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, it's kind of like,
they're not huge.
it's from someone who's been on the architect side and now on the CBOC side, and I asked the question a lot about sort of lessons learned, right? Because we're in the, what, 20th year of the third biggest bond program in the state, correct?
Yep.
Something like that. And almost every old school in Richmond has had remnants of an old foundation, remnant, oil tanks. Nystrom had it, Washington had it. Every school I've worked on had it.
Right.
It's a little surprising that it's not anticipated and just known, and like put in the extra due diligence, do some ground penetrating radar, spend 10K and save, a whole lot, right? Knowing that they're old, it's 100-year-old plus sites. It's like at some point, like, aren't we learning lessons? And I realize new people, new processes, but I think big picture, like, I'm gonna keep harping on that, is like, okay, we've done how many schools now in 20 years? We've seen this again and again and again. It's always like, oh, we never knew, and I'm not saying it's on you, Ellen, but I'm saying as a district, like, we've got that record. We those histories are there. People are still here too. It's kind of shocking that it's like every time it's a surprise. Well, we didn't know.
I don't know if it was quote unquote a surprise, right? I mean, we were anticipating, and that's part of the reason why we pulled out phase one, right? We specifically did phase one knowing that we most likely were going to find something. So I don't know we call it an unforeseen condition because the exact scale and scope of what it was going to be was some level unknown. But we anticipated that we were going to find something, and that was specifically why, especially with all three of these projects, we moved forward with a significant amount of float on our phase ones across the board, because we knew we were going to have to absorb the fact that these were old sites and that there was going to be something there. So I don't know, but there's a certain level of like diminishing returns, right? You can try to find things forever. We knew that there was going to be a significant amount of cut on this site. So when I say cut, it means that we're removing a significant amount of soil to be able to make the grades across the site. this site was designed originally where basically the difference between Potrero and Cypress was just a plateau. And that was gonna end up causing us a lot of ramps and things. So the approach that the architect took, to minimize long-term amount of steps and ramps and things that we needed on the site, was to do more of a tiered approach to the site. But that means that we were gonna have to remove soil no matter what. So we knew we were gonna be digging, we knew we were gonna find things. The nice part is, because this is an unoccupied campus, we have a little bit more freedom of how to deal with those items when they come up. We don't anticipate, especially with the delay from DSA, of this really becoming a schedule delay. And we had within our soft costs the level of contingency, knowing that we were coming into this existing site and it was going to be what it's going to be, right? So, I mean, there's a definition, there's a point where you're defining projects. But making sure you have the money in place and the time, more importantly, in place for you to deal with what comes is how we approach this particular.
And now you've got more time than you thought you had because.
Well, that's a little unfortunate, but it is what it is.
So is that something that's still in the middle of kind of being addressed? Like you don't know exactly what the total costs are gonna be for that?
Yeah, we're still getting
Hazmat
permits in
tanks
place. And so once we have our permits in place, they'll define it, to the level we need to be defined. So, and there will be additional testing around, once we're able to remove the tanks, we have to do additional testing around it to confirm that the soil around it is in good shape. And if it's not, we'll deal with it appropriately. But that's part of the process of when you have something like this on your site, so. We're prepared to handle it. It's just a matter of getting through it. So phase 2, we talked about, it's under review at DSA. We did have a groundbreaking, so that was a fun event. And we had all sorts of people. The turnout for that event was fantastic. It was great to see the stage community. Since we haven't had a report for a while, some of these are older pictures, some of them are newer. So we did mobilize on the site. The Alton team did a really nice job of protecting both sides of the site where we were bumping up against either the community path or the neighbors' backyards. We are attempting to save the oak tree. We're doing what we can to save it.
Is that on our site? Or
It is.
Jason?
Yeah, so we're trying hard to make that happen
Is it healthy?
at the moment.
Is there anticipation that, like, is it anticipated the roots may be disturbed? Or
It's,
how close it gets to the foundation or whatever?
yeah, I mean, it's always hard when you're running a lot of construction equipment around a tree. You can affect the compaction of the soil. So we're sanctioning off. There's also a lot of, this is the lowest, next to this tree is our lowest point on the site. So we have to bring all the drainage to that low point. But that causes the cuts to be interesting. So we've been working hard with the civil to maintain the grading around it. So we disturb as many little of the roots as possible. But that's all part of the mobilization process. This picture shows us putting in the storm drain lines. So we have catch basin in the bottom corner and the different lines coming in with the trench. You don't see the pipe, you'll see the identifier tape. So in the future, when we try to find the storm drain line, we can find it. But there's a layer of bedding and then the pipe below that, but you can see that the bedding there is a different material. So that's what we've been busy doing at Stage.
Ellen, oh yeah, go ahead.
Go for Brendan.
The site is pretty constrained, right? It's space constrained. So is there no bioswale or any type of?
Oh, there's bioswales all over the place.
Oh, there are.
Oh, yeah. So this is collecting post bioswale.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, but no, we've got plenty of bioswale.
Have there been any unexpected soils conditions that have been problematic?
I don't know if they've definitely not been unexpected. We did do pretty extensive testing, before we got going, so that we could, deal with it appropriately.
Lime treatment or anything like that?
We will be doing quite a bit of lime treatment. That's, further down the road. So first, we're gonna put in our, utilities, then we're gonna cut the site and do a level of grading. Then we'll do a lime treat, before we move into the next phase of DSA.
And for those that don't know, lime treatment, is that for stabilization?
Lime treatment, we have a ton of clay in this area. So if you ever want to take a pottery, for the most part, you could just take a block out of your backyard. I mean, it's like solid. So, clay is what we call an expansive soil. So when clay gets wet, it expands, and when it dries out, it shrinks and cracks. The problem with that is it makes it not so stable, right? And so lime treatment is just that. You introduce lime into the soil itself. There's a process to lay the lime and mix it into the soil. It interacts with the water and it helps stabilize it. So it is a stabilization to counteract the expansiveness of our soil.
And that was known prior to bringing the contract on.
Yeah. So lime treatment was all part of the geotech. So when you see those expenses, right, and this says things about geotechnical services, before we do a design, we have a geotechnical expert come out to our sites. They do different borings and they take sampling at different levels to know what our soil is underneath. They produce a report that tells the architect and really importantly, the structural designer, what the conditions of the soil are and what kind of mitigation factors that they should put into place. That is all submitted to the California Geologic Society, CGS, which you guys have heard me talk about before. That's the state agency that reviews how we approach our soil stabilization and mitigation. They review our drawings and our designs, and most importantly, the geotechnical analysis before DSA will approve our drawings, Division of State Architect. So as long as we get through CGS, then we go to DSA. The two of them combined make sure that we have good subsoil for whatever we structurally build on top. Now there has been at Kennedy, you'll see that we did do an amendment for Nino Moore. DSA required us to do additional calculations on the footing design and analyze the soil in a different way. So we did an amendment to Nino Moore, who was our geotechnical on that particular project, so that they could do that additional analysis. And that was in response to a comment that we received from DSA, which then went to HKIT, the architect, so that the structural designer could do the additional calculations required that they were asking for. So sometimes we try to get the soils analysis to a point where everybody's happy. Sometimes in design too, the geotechnical is an important part because the architect and structural designer will sometimes want to test out different types of foundations. Say, okay, if we do this type of foundation, what do we need to do with the soil? If we do this type of foundation, what do we need to do with the soil? And it's important for us to be able to provide that information, even though we pay a little bit for the geotechnical to run those analysis, because sometimes one foundation is cheaper than the other foundation or has less design constraints. You'll see that throughout our projects, our geotechnicals continue to get amendments, but those are really reflective of how the design is progressing, what the requirements are from DSA. And then once we get into construction, we again amend the contract so that they can test all the things the contractor is doing.
And to place the drain lines in, Ellen, how deep are they digging?
So it depends. I don't know off the top of my head on Stage how deep it goes. We have minimums that we're required to go down. But often, so your gravity lines, what we call gravity lines are your sewer and your storm drain. And they're gravity because that's how they flow, right? There's no magic pump. They're not pressurized. So the gravity lines are always what sets your site, because we have certain, places and ranges that we can hit the city's infrastructure. And so those are the ones that we can't do a lot of that. We have to maintain the gravity flow. For our pressurized system, and you'll see it when I get to Richmond, for our non-pressure or for our pressurized systems, as well as for what we call our dry utilities, we have to interweave those through and above and below, the gravity lines. So, fire water is another one just because we have to hit and maintain certain amount of pressures. The more bins you put in a fire line, or any pressurized line, the lower your pressure gets. And so, that's another one that we try to minimize. So when you're doing, the easiest way to install your underground utilities is to start with gravity, then do your fire water, then do your other pressurized lines, and then do your dry. That's the preferred way to go about it. Doesn't always work out that way.
And real quickly, approximately how long did that take for Steve?
Prestige, putting in the storm drain was a relatively quick activity. It was only, these are only the main lines. They're not all the little lines. But that was only like a week or two worth of work. We had some serious rain in, I believe, February. So in the chunk of time that I'm reporting to you guys about, that did slow us down. We had to wait for the clay to dry a little bit before we could keep moving. But otherwise, it's a relatively quick process to put in, the pipes when you don't have to integrate with other things. And that's the nice part about Siege, is as soon as we hit it, we might find additional things we have to take out, but it's smooth sailing because you're not trying to keep anything. That is the opposite of what's happening at Kennedy Richmond, because we have to maintain operation. So at Kennedy, we have, demolition complete. We are doing the site utilities right now. Phase 1.3 is also in DSA review. We're anticipating, we have gotten our first set of comments back. We're anticipating to put that check in tomorrow. No, the 18th, 2 days from now. Here we are also going to bid out the DSA back check set to help, try to allow us to still be able to build during summer. Phase 2 and 3 is the modernization work, and so those are still under design. So one thing, I know that we've talked a lot, or I've said the words utility corridor, and I wanted to give you kind of an idea of what I meant by a utility corridor. So at the at Kennedy, this building right here is the 300 library. This one's the 400, which is the science. And down here is the 800, which is where the current cafeteria is. This kind of grayed out section is really the footprint of what our new building will be. It jogs in and out a little bit on the front, but this gives you kind of an idea of what we're talking about. And so this section right here, where you see all the soil is, disturbed, that's what we refer to as the utility corridor. So every utility that we need is running down this utility corridor, and we're trying to get all of them in there. And when I was talking about those different layers of utilities that we put in, we have some major, what we call joint trenches, going down this area, because on top of trying to get all the utilities in there, we also have a thin bioswale that goes along the edge of the building. And we have what they call zone of influence from each one of the footings. And so those are diagonal lines that come down. and dictate when you're disturbing the soil too close to your foundations. So there's a whole bunch going on in this corridor, and that's where a majority of the work has been happening. So I just want to give you kind of an idea of what that meant. We've also been working over near what we're calling Building B, which is the combination dining and performing arts center, reworking the, bringing in the new domestic water and fire water connections. So that's what you see here in the blue piping. And so we're getting new connections to the street and also working around where the building footprints are so that we can, the original water lines were in the way of, where the buildings are going, and we don't run these lines under the building. So that's what's been happening at Kennedy. On top of that, we have one other activity going on, which is actually on the back side of the 800 building, in the staff parking lot. And you can see this is the stadium fencing behind. We're bringing in a new electrical service. So this is bringing in all the conduit for the new electrical service. The existing electrical box is down over here outside the fence line. So we have to bring all the piping in to be able to maintain our current service, as well as introduce our new switchgear. So that's coming in soon. So we will be operating this site on a generator for a short period of time, because we can't keep both systems running, or we can't reconnect all the connection points and keep the service running at the same time. So that will be happening here in the spring. But this is a huge deal that will open up the ability for us to move into the next phase. And if you remember, for a while there, getting switchgear components was a huge lead item. It took months and months and months. They were 6 to 9 months out to be able to get this kind of equipment. So this is one of the things that we worked really hard to fast track, so that we wouldn't run into a problem with being able to get the new buildings up and running. Okay, Richmond, speaking of electrical, oh my gosh. Similar process, right? Phase 1.1 is putting in the utilities. Phase 1.2 is building the new building. We have bid 1.1. We are waiting for DSA approval. So we're expecting to finish the back check on hopefully the 23rd. We have our appointment then. And then as soon as we get out of DSA, we'll award that contract. Phase 2 is the modernization, which is still is in construction documents. We're about 60% on construction documents for phase 2 and 3. We did have a nice staff meeting with Richmond High to give them an update of where we were project-wide last month, which was good. So the picture before was just when we were starting to set boxes for the main electrical lines that were going across campus. We are putting in a new electrical service here that is planned to happen a little bit later in the phasing. But we're getting all of the lines in now. So the middle picture, you can see the pipes going in. The last picture is the backfill of those. But you can see some of these different things that we're crossing. Those are all existing utilities that we needed to maintain operation on. We are also putting in a bunch of wet utilities. So we have our one of our water lines here. We have some storm. But this is an electrical pathway. We ended up having to dive deep with our electrical because our gravity lines were so shallow. We do have a really large pump that's involved with our storm drain system at Richmond because of how shallow the city system is. So at the very end of this long trench down here, can't see it, but there's a quite a large container that is pump that will allow the stormwater to exit our site.
Have you guys encountered any kind of archaeological artifacts during all this excavation?
You know, we found some square rebar, which was fun. You don't see square rebar every day. We did find a portion of the previous foundation. So we did have
At
to take
Richmond?
that out at Richmond
And Stige?
and Steege. We only needed to remove a little chunk of it. But over by the main entrance, there was a section, but that's where we found the square rebar, which was kind of cool.
But no native,
No, not that archaeological.
I was wondering too, how much you guys find.
I mean, from time to time, we've definitely found some loose brick and things, but nothing any more ancient than that. Don't get me in trouble here.
but I assume the district has archaeologists assigned to these sites. Looking at things while they're excavating? Wouldn't that be a part of CEQA?
CEQA and DSA, is that tied together at all?
Well, sure, CEQA applies to any project in the state.
Right, but is
So
the
there's-
DSA process like?
No, it's
you have
not,
to go
it's not at
through?
all tied to DSA. So each of these projects, correct me if I'm wrong, has a CEQA document, right? They're either a exempt, mitigated negative deck. Yeah, I believe they have EIRs, yeah, or is it?
No, these are all exemptions because they were existing site and we're not increasing the overall capacity of the site. So these are,
And those were, who
Notice of
processes those? Is it just
The
the
county.
district?
no, we submit the documentation to the county,
Contra Costa County.
Contra Costa County, and I file it with Contra Costa County, and then we post on the school site to say, in the 30-day time period, if you have any issues. So we went through an exemption process for all three of these sites.
So it's the county, not the school district, who is the lead agency. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't think it's a lead agency, but it is who we file the
Because I know with
exemption with.
CEQA, there's a lead agency, and I believe it's the district.
We are the lead
Yeah,
agency, yes.
so it's the district who bears that responsibility, and the district as the lead agency should be vetting all this stuff. It's kind of interesting that there's not like an archaeologist on these projects, because I've done with much smaller projects where there have been. And I was looking at some of when we were talking about Steege and the potential historic nature of that, and there was a lot of frankly sloppiness in those CEQA documents that was inaccurate or, just not factual, but when I was reading through it, something to be, aware of. I'd be glad to show you what I found on the speech.
Correct.
So just a real quick question, and I know we're over time, so with CEQA, that gets filed with the county. And then
So-
DSA, they are in charge of the architectural renderings and approving the plans.
So
there's
we get basically our building permit from DSA, Division of
Okay.
State Architect.
Okay.
CEQA is the California
California Environmental
Quality
Quality Act.
agent,
Act.
okay, act.
So it's state law that basically says any project considered a project, and there's a whole,
Mhm.
criteria there, but anything can be a project that it has to be at least vetted by per CEQA, and there's typically a lead agency, which if it were a project that's not a school project, it would be the city of Richmond, right? Or it could be Contra Costa County. For the school district, they're the lead agency, so. The lead agency has to do some due diligence. Typically, they hire, as I'm sure you guys did, hire a environmental firm, ESA, LSA, there's a lot of local environmental, and then they do a whole series of, there's an initial study that basically says, okay, we've looked at this and here's where we think it lies on the map of secret determination, right? Exempt would be, you have to do nothing, mitigated negative deck, you're mitigating, you know, certain factors, and then a full EIR, environmental impact report. And those get pretty big and weighty, and they look at what's the environmental impact of the project and what's gonna be done to mitigate those impacts. So in a situation like this, you might say, well, this site, you know, has been here, maybe we know there's some kind of California newts or, you know, Native Americans that had dwellings near here, maybe they use this for whatever, and so a mitigation measure might be that there's an archaeologist as a part of the project who's making sure that when they're digging holes and they find bones, they're not just throwing it back in dirt. As an example.
But because these are historically, school sites, there's very specific exemptions that you need to, criteria that you need to meet to be able to do a notice of exemption. And because these were, high schools that had a capacity over the capacity that what we're building, we met the exemptions, that allowed us to file a notice of exemption with the county. And so the county is just the recording agency. We are the ELA. We did do that for Steve Richmond and Kennedy.
And even with the notice of exemption, you should still get public comment, correct? Or you should put out publicize that we might get an exemption or we're looking at this.
And we did, we took it to the
Okay.
board, we posted it at site for 30 days. There were, physical, copies posted on the front doors of all those sites. So we did that process.
Okay.
And then we also did the county filing process, which is also part of that notification.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah.
See if that was a before the exception. Thank you.
Okay, so we're at time.
And that
Is
was
there
the,
any, yeah, I know that's your last slide and you have your awesome, flyers. Is there any objection to extending for 10 minutes? Or do folks need to,
No objection.
we good? Power through 10 minutes?
Yeah, I might have to leave after like 5.
Okay,
Like, yeah.
any objections?
No.
Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you, Ellen. And then I propose that we table item I, the financial reports, and we go straight into J. Any objection to that?
No.
So, J is adopt the 2026 CBOC schedule. There was a minor change to it. I would just suggest that, you know, any dates that you can't make, you let me know, and we're tracking quorum and all that. So if there's no objection to adopting this schedule, it's pretty much the same as we had in January. Most of the dates are the third Mondays, which we agreed to change a couple months ago. So any objections to that schedule?
do we really want to do December 21st?
We can knock it off. We can.
I believe the district's on a holiday at that point.
Well, I filled out the survey and I can't join that one, but up to us, maybe.
Maybe just pass all of them up to November.
As long as we
Yeah.
post that.
The motion to strike December 21st.
Yes.
Second,
The winter solstice, right?
All the way.
all the way.
December 21st, yeah.
Okay, so, any objection to approving, the schedule with the amendment of striking the 21st of December? No objection.
Move to approve.
Okay. Sounds unanimous. Everybody, all in favor? Okay, thank you. And then we have the CBOC site visits tentative schedule. These are Fridays, a couple of Wednesdays and a Monday, and then a couple Saturdays late in the year. And so this was just an attempt to try to put out there the most diverse options. I think, you know, likely some of these will fall off, but I think that should be informed by our relative availability and what we can step up and commit to. and of course, Ellen's availability as well. Yeah, so the sites haven't been selected yet, but based on I met with Ellen earlier, I think in February, and just talking about picking the sites based on the construction schedule to see. While sometimes it's not as interesting to see just the dirt and the trenches. I mean, we just had like a 15-minute discussion on trenches and the depth and this, how water flows and all that. So, which was really
Literally, I was inspired by the auditor. I'm sorry.
No, that was great. It's a lot. I think a lot of people learned a lot. So, the attempt here, the approach is really to like put out as many dates as we can.
Yeah.
It is a lot, but if we can get a couple people at minimum at most of these, that would be success. And hopefully, many of us can attend a couple or more.
Yeah, there are a couple of very important projects this year too, so.
We're moving.
People, yeah.
Lots of phases.
Richmond, Kennedy, huge.
So, so these are not set in stone, but we can adopt this. We can say we're doing it, and then
Can we
Yeah.
set the location for the 24th, since that's, like next week?
sure.
April 24th?
Where do you want to go? Where should we go?
Can I go to speech?
You can go, Steve.
Oh, do you have a recommendation
What do you
based
think would
on
be the
construction schedule?
most interesting to see on that day, Ellen? Sounds like everything's sort of in a similar state, right?
Most of them are in the similar state. Actually, there will not really be much going on at Kennedy. We are basically wrapping it up.
So, well, in the
so
interest of
there-
time, I would say let's adopt the schedule.
Okay,
I think we're gonna make the best decision of location based on, maybe I can solicit feedback. You guys can send me feedback if you really want to go to Stige or whatever. And then we'll just kind of populate. So all in favor of this site visit tentative schedule here? Aye. Any objections? Cool. All right, adopted.
oh, and I'm sorry, I was a month ahead of schedule anyways. We have a
Right,
month.
I thought you were
I'm
being
sorry.
serious, like time moving fast in Ellen's world.
Sorry about that. It's getting late, folks.
I love that energy, Ellen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item L, so just, we're done with that. Site visit committee activity report. We are gearing up for these site visits. One of the things that I'm gonna look into is a checklist for recording information while we're on the site visit. We can get GoPros. I'm sure John will be there with his camera, which is always great.
I want somebody with the helmet.
Yeah, we need the footage.
Branded and everything, yeah.
Yeah. The district logo. Right, we need.
Okay, then moving to item M, Tasha, do you have anything you want to say about the website, or make any requests, just briefly if you want?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I'm so happy we were on the topic of GoPro because we do need footage. And I love Don's photography, but it's kind of hard getting photos from him these days. So I need photos for the annual report. So I've actually started the annual report. I can't really show you here. But it's in progress. We already have all of the table of contents, all of the sections. I'm just organizing it all now. I need photos. So 2025. Well, I can go into our CBOC, our agendas, and I can pull some photos from there.
Right.
So, some exclusive photos, all of us kind of standing or like groundbreaking, things like that. The special moments that would be nice to capture in the annual report.
Don has some, I can work on him as well to try to get some, because I don't know how much.
Yeah, I mean, I have some here and there.
Yeah.
Previous CBOCs have gone through like the PowerPoint. If there's specific ones you want, then I can pull the original so that they're a little bit better quality than if you're just trying to pull it off of a PowerPoint
Okay.
or a PDF, right?
Yeah, no, that's great.
So if you identify what you're looking for out of the ones we presented, then I'd be happy to send those along.
Well, we're gonna do some top 10 takeaways from the year. And we want project highlights, the most anticipated projects from that fiscal year.
So I mean, if you share your top 10 with me, I'll see if I can, find photos that are applicable to whatever your
Okay, yeah,
top 10
Yeah.
is, but that's easier than me just kind of like,
Exactly, yeah. Like, as long as we got 10, 15 really good pictures, then that'll be nice to spruce it up, and make it lively. People like to look versus read, so, picture says 1,000 things. Which brings me to my next picture request. We at the CBOC, we would love headshots. Uniform headshot,
uniform headshot.
cohesive,
On the CBOC website.
yes, for
Are
our,
there-
for our sections and our
are there
annual
district
report.
resources?
Yes.
Like a photographer?
Yeah.
Let me see what,
You get a
Don would be
background,
happy to, I'm
a
sure.
blow dryer.
yeah.
Blow dryer? Yes, please, just, we wanna look nice, we don't wanna be looking all.
Let me talk to the communications department and see what kind of options we have for
Okay,
taking district headshots.
okay, great, can we?
And then
Okay.
we'll try to
In the
figure out
interest
if
of
we
time,
can.
we move on?
Yes,
Or you got
we
anything
can
else?
move on, we're all good. Those
Thank
are-
you,
for
though,
that.
Tashi.
That
All
was-
important updates.
Item N, annual report, which you touched on already, but Dulce, you got any,
Just to add, and I'll be quick, we looked at various CBOC sample reports and templates. Looked at the variety of, detail. Some of them have CBOC member bios, some of them are just listed. We met in February, the working group, to try to complete the report, so we have a template. It looks really beautiful, we'll add some photos. We're working towards completion, and once we have the final audits, we can add some of the content, but hoping to share with you all before we finalize it. That's it.
thank you, Dulce. Yeah.
In addition to the photos, just the exact colors that the district uses, the exact blue and the exact yellow.
So I sent you the,
Oh, yeah, she.
The-
Okay, great,
Yeah, I think.
perfect, thank you. Perfect, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, the next, item O, next scheduled meeting is April 20th, 6:15, same time. And just before adjournment, I should have done this in the beginning, but Leanne, would you like to say a few words about yourself and, why you want to serve on, or why you're drawn to the service of the CBOC?
Sure. So as I shared earlier, I have a child who's in TK now, and I have a 10-month-old who will be entering the school district. We've been residents in Tarrant Hills for the last 10 years. We own our home here, so we are invested in this community, in this school district, and I'm just looking to learn more about how to get involved, how I can help impact what's going to happen in my kids' schools for the next 18 years. I have a background in, I work in nonprofit doing contract management. I looked into audit reports pretty much on a regular basis. I'm editing like our 990. I've also worked at school districts in New Jersey. I served on the school board in Alameda, their charter school management association. So my background's in education policy.
You're hired.
Yeah, you are.
Just
We can leave it here next time.
We got our reports at City of Vallejo doing staffing missions, so
Nice.
I'd like to see if I can help, if I can learn more, and if that can actually just help my kids have a better school experience.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for sharing, and yeah, we're welcoming you with open arms. So we'll get you scheduled for an interview, and approved through the board's process.
yeah. And I know Sylvia's working on getting this scheduled together with our board members, so.
Awesome. Okay, it is 8:28 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Great job, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Thank you, great job.
Yeah, but negative.
Oh, yeah, for sure.